Thank you all and welcome to today's Member Forum meeting. As many of you will know, the current Lord Mayor, Councillor Paul Goggin, has been very unwell for the past 2 months. I'm pleased to report that his health is improving, and I'm sure the Chamber will all join me in sending the Lord Mayor our very best wishes and hopes for a full and speedy recovery. Hear, hear. Thank you. Now, safety information. I'd like to draw your attention to the emergency evacuation procedure. Please exit the building from the nearest exit and congregate by the cathedral. Full details of the questions submitted to Member Forum and the Mayor's written replies were published on the Council's website. Groups have submitted their questions in priority order and are presented rotating around the party groups. Each councillor has asked a maximum of 2 questions about one topic or 2 separate questions about 2 different topics. Councillors have a maximum of 2 supplementary questions. If a councillor asks 1 question, they only have 1 supplementary. If a councillor asks 2 questions, they can ask 1 supplementary question per question asked. Okay, I think that's very clear now, so we will move straight on to the questions. And the first question is Green Question 1, so I'd like to invite Patrick McAllister to respond to his questions and answers on the Avon Crescent and Chocolate Path. Avon Crescent first, do you have supplementaries?
I do, yes, thank you, Acting Lord Mayor.
Deputy, please.
Deputy, apologies. So regarding the Chocolate Path, thank you for the written answers, but I'm sure that by now the administration may be aware that there is a gate that was part of the works that is still at the top of Vauxhall Bridge, barring access between the bridge and the Chocolate Path. I've personally already observed people trying to climb around it rather than descend and go the long way around, which is a clear health and safety issue. So I'm wondering, when can we expect this gate to be removed?
Yeah, I'll just have to talk to the team organising the works about the schedule for that particular gate. There's obviously a lot going on with all the bridges being taken into account as well during that work, but yeah, we'll get back to you with a date.
Thank you. Do you have a question, a supplementary question on another one?
I do, yes. I'm wondering if there's going to be a commitment to, regarding Avon Crescent, bring forward a proposal to fulfil the outstanding planning obligations regarding the AVTM scheme and the environmental mitigations.
I'll get further details from the officers and come back to you on that. All I would say is as I shared with you in the answer just now, there's a wider piece of work going on for the area. Avon Crescent is part of that wider piece of work. We have a number of priorities. One of those is obviously renovating the whole area, regenerating the whole area, making it all that it can be, should be, but also maintaining access to the homes and the SS Great Britain and the facilities down there as well. So all that stuff will be taken into account.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first Labour question is from Marley. Marley Bennett, please. We've got questions on Gainsborough Square and council housing. Supplementaries?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, and thank you, Marvin, for your answers. First supplementary on the first question. Just about this being a really good news story, this purchase of the sort of lot on Gainsborough Square. My question was specifically about if the local community says that the community space they'd want to see becoming a pub, that being something the council would consider, just to, you know, sort of stress how pubs are community spaces. Appreciate not for everyone, but there isn't a pub in the local area, and would really appreciate that if that is something that comes from the community. That's something we could consider.
Everything will be taken into consideration. Obviously, we don't run pubs, you know, or if they did, they'd probably be the best pubs in the world, to coin a phrase. But we don't run pubs, so obviously to make a pub viable takes, you know, many things to be in play, to have an owner, you know, distributor, staff, and people who want it. And we have seen on a number of fronts in Bristol, actually, over the years, there's been a difference between people who say they want something to be there and a number of people who will actually go and use it. And so, you know, whoever was going to make that decision would have to be confident that there was a market and it was going to be sustainable and not fall into a state of underuse, disrepair and a wasted opportunity.
Thank you, Marley. Do you have a supplementary on the housing question?
Yes, I do, Deputy Lord Mayor. Just really pleased to see the progress that is coming through from the Gorham Homes housing scheme. Now we're sort of beginning to see the houses being delivered, and got an update earlier today about the development partner Vistry Countryside. That, you know, whilst a lot of, you know, there's turbulence in the market and burn back from some schemes, actually affordable and council housing schemes is something that remains viable. Just, you know, what assurances can we offer that this is something the council will remain committed to, particularly as we go sort of into an election and potentially a new system, well, definitely a new system. What assurances we can offer this is worthwhile to continue pursuing?
Well, we can give the assurance under this administration. It's what we've done for the 7+ years we've been in office, and it's what we'll do for the remaining 8 or so months that we are here. It's the place we've planted our flag. We've identified housing repeatedly as the key policy tool within the city. It's a health intervention, it's an economic intervention, it's an environmental intervention. And so we've put it front and centre. And so it's one of the reasons we have such a strong national, one of the reasons we have such a strong national and international reputation, you know, as a city that's getting stuff done at this moment in time. What happens after we've left will obviously be down to the various committees that will be overseeing. But I'm sure with people like yourself still in the chamber, and Tom, and dare I say Tony as well, that there'll be people here who are really driving in on making sure that we are committed to making this a city in which people can actually afford to live.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
First Conservative question is from John Galandris on blocked drains, please. John.
Thank you very much, Deputy Lord Mayor. Marvin, thank you for the answers. And so the service level agreement, once somebody's reported a blocked drain, is 28 days. Now, unlike potholes that you can actually see are fixed, the drains are obviously, you can't see whether they've been cleared or not. And the fact that so many people are complaining to me makes me wonder whether the contractor is actually doing the work. So my supplementary question is, do we check up on the contractors? Is there an audit trail? Is there a random checking?
We do, but let me say, I share your frustration in this because I constantly walk around and see things around the city and think to myself, did we get a good job done there? Did we get our value? And I'm not going to put a time period on it, but you have heard anecdotes from the past that people think when they get a council contract, hey, happy days. And we don't want that. We want the best return on the money we can, on the money we spend on behalf of the city. So I've asked John Smith to come back to me, on this question. A number of questions I've asked him to be specific about was, how do we measure performance? How do we detect poor performance? How do we monitor it? And what are the consequences of poor performance? And we need to see some consequences. And what I'll do is I'll make sure that an invitation is extended to you to attend that discussion.
Thanks very much, Marvin. No second supplementary, but just to say thank you for agreeing to have a good sweep of Stoke Hill, which could do with a good look. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on now to the Lib Dem question number 1, which is from Andrew Varney. Andrew's not here now. Sorry. Next question then, the Knoll Community Party. So Gary, you are here. You've got a question on the Newquay Road. Do you have a supplementary?
There's been a considerable amount of disquiet about responses from the administration at the bottom of on issues at the bottom of Newquay Road. Residents are extremely challenged by what's been happening there. We have questions that were put in by residents today which have actually been filleted, and quite frankly they could have been adjusted, and there was an offer to adjust them to fit in with concerns that were expressed. But we have an organisation there that has taken over a youth club that was desperately needed and made all sorts of promises about what it was going to do for the community, which have not been kept. It also has,
Gary, I'm going to press you to come to a question, please.
Yes, it also has the added problem that the organisation has been involved with gay therapy, which doesn't exactly endear them to the community. Will the Mayor now step in urgently and review this situation, because it will not be allowed to carry on for long.
I think essentially you're being asked to review the situation.
Sure, we're reviewing situations all the time. I mean, I'm not going to, in your latter point, you know, no rules in terms of the lease have been violated. I'm going to leave you to make all the accusations you want about what's going on up there. But in terms of the antisocial behaviour stuff that you talked about as well, I listed the range of organisations that are involved, working at all levels in the city to try and make sure our streets were as safe as possible for people of Bristol. You know, I might just add as well, having attended young Eddie's funeral just a few weeks ago, the safety on our streets is an absolute top priority for this administration. There's a lot of risk in the city right now. I was just on the phone to someone just now about some of the incidents we've had on our streets that are making people feel wary at this time. So this fits within a wider suite of work that we're trying to do. And any positive, constructive contributions from upstanding members such as yourself would be welcome.
Good. The other supplementary, there's some fairly simple construction work that was actually needing done. Various offices, and it got cancelled because apparently there was some rumour around that the police didn't want it done, which they've hotly denied. Now, I've been contacted by several other officers since, but none of them are actually in a position to say, we will actually get this job done and get on with it. And that's really what's needed. So I'm appealing to the Mayor to actually appoint somebody who can actually say, we need this job done now.
I'm not 100% following, to be honest, Councillor Hopkins, but what I would say, I think is really important for, particularly in this chamber, that we don't just come and report on rumours as causes, because they are by definition rumours. We need to do a little bit more work to stand them up or to knock them down before we start to float rumours around, although I can understand it will get you some columns. But, you know, if you, whatever the issue is that you're referring to, if you want some specific council attention on it, obviously you are a councillor. You can come to me outside of here if you want, right to my office, or you can approach officers yourself as an elected member and put a proposition to them on how that challenge can be solved.
Okay.
Thank you, Guy. Okay, so moving on now to Green Question 2, which is from David Wilcox. David, you've got supplementary questions on your questions about the RAC and the buildings and family cycling centre.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I don't have a supplementary for my first question, but I would like to ask the Mayor whether he thinks there might be a gap in the availability of a family cycling centre in Bristol while the site in Hengrove is built upon and the new site is procured, please.
Well, I see Don indicating. Don, let you respond then.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I'm a director of Gorham as well as Cabinet Member for Transport, so in a sense I'm kind of in the middle of the two, so I will ensure there isn't a gap. We're just preparing the planning application for Lawrence Weston at the moment.
Okay, thank you. So moving on then to Labour Question 2, which is Brenda Massey. You've got 2 questions on schools.
Thank you. I've only got one follow-up question. And thank you for the response. And it's a relief to know that the situation with RAC is not impacting on schools in Bristol. However, it is shameful that the government took 9 months to take any action on the situation and waited until just before the school year started. So can you confirm that we will continue to check on any potential impact on our most vulnerable children who are placed outside of the city?
Yeah, we will. We can confirm that. I'll just add too as well. I think Andrew Marr did a very powerful reflection recently of just how appropriate the symbol that after 13 years of the government being in power, what we have as a legacy just before the election of the schools literally crumbling around the children that need them as part of their pathway. And I think the other image it feeds into, as he was suggesting, is it shows what happens when you begin to, what you might call, disinvest in your country. It crumbles around you. Now, we have it writ large before us in terms of the physical schools right now and children being sent home, but we've had disinvestment in local government. under investment in the services, the interventions we make, over time, and we can see the consequences as we are left trying to make up effectively for £15 worth of need with a £10 budget, which has essentially been the challenge of local government as austerity has gripped tighter and tighter around our throats. And you've seen the consequences in places like Woking and most latterly Birmingham as well. So we will make that commitment. But again, like I said, it's a fitting symbol of the challenge we've taken on as a local authority at this time.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so now we move on to Conservative question 2, which is Mark Weston. You have a question about cleansing regimes. Do you have supplementaries, please?
I do indeed, my Lord Mayor. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the Mayor for his responses. He is right, it's not just about frequency, but it is also a little bit about quality. So it's shocking to hear, for example, that Crow Lane in my ward technically is cleansed daily. I would think every resident who goes on Crow Lane would be surprised. Can I ask, sort of similar to my colleague Councillor Glandris, when do we check to see that the cleansing actually happens? Because I litter pick Crow Lane quite a lot, and there always seems to be litter, no matter what time of the day it is.
So they are quarterly, Mark. But again, as I said to John Glandis, I'll share with you that I share frustration on this. When we first came in, we launched Clean Streets, and that was about street cleanliness. But actually, we wanted to back it up as well, so that we look at the whole system around waste in the city, reducing the generation of waste in the first instance, more efficient processing, and then increasing reuse, recycling. I regularly take pictures and send it in and ask what quality control is going on, because sometimes we have seen teams out, and I've not always seen people working as hard as I thought they should on our dime. That's not across the board. We've got some excellent people going now, really committed, but that quality control is something that I'm pretty hot on. I've asked Kai to actually convene a session where we can meet with Bristol Waste as well, just to go over the works and to talk with them about their plans for the impact they're going to have in the city over the coming months and years as well. And again, I'll be happy to share that conversation with yourself and any other councillors that are keen on this challenge.
Thank you. Do you have a second supplementary?
I do indeed. Interesting you brought Kai. We were actually at the same public meeting last night to BS10 councillors. So it's also not just about quality, it's about activity. So when I spoke to the senior street enforcement team and neighbourhood enforcement teams, and he talked about cleansing, in Clifton, the weeds are pulled out by hand. The hose go around, they do that. Interesting enough, that doesn't happen in our area. So it seems a different cleansing activity happens in parts of the city to other parts of the city. So if we're going to be looking at the quality of work, I think it's fair to say that we also need to be looking at, and I would ask for your intervention here for that meeting, that we actually get a fair crack at some of the services that happen as part of this cleansing as well. The Big Tidy was excellent, and they did a great job, but they're only there once. And our residents yesterday were joking that, well, my weed is 4 foot high, how tall is yours? To be clear, that is the plant, not the drug. We weren't talking about that.
Mark, you're seducing me. I'm so interested in what you're saying that I'm forgetting to remind you to get to a question.
I sort of asked one in the middle, but it was in the middle of a ramble. Can I please ask you to review actually the cleansing regime as to what tasks are performed on places like Crow Lane or Greystoke to make sure that we actually get weeding as well as the litter picking?
Yeah, we will, Kai. We can include that in the conversation. I mean, I would say everything we get is important feedback for us to take to the company. If it's the case, and I want to jump on it more, but if it's the case that areas are being treated differently, we want to know why that was happening. If it was justifiable, then we'd say, okay, we can understand your rationale. If it's not, then obviously it must come into line with our principle that you're offering something of unequal level of service, and we'll be on top of that like a ton of bricks.
Okay.
So feed that into me.
Okay, moving along to Lib Dem question 2 from Tim Kent, please. You have 2 questions about buses. Do you have supplementaries, Tim?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. First off, thank you for your answers, Mayor. I've noted that last year the BSIP funding of over £20 million for supported bus routes was reduced to around just £5 million. Can I just ask, were you personally consulted by WACA about that change to BSIP or not?
what I would say is we wish WECA's engagement with the constituent authorities was stronger than it is.
Fair enough, thank you. I think we could read between the lines on that answer. Thank you for your answer to the second question. Yes, I will make further representations to WECA and the Metro Mayor, as you suggest, and I also welcome your comments on franchising. At the moment, there's over £4 million of BSIP funding for supported bus routes not committed, and we have only 18 months left to spend it. Can we send to you our proposals, which we've already put to the WECA Mayor, for possible new bus routes in South Bristol in advance of your October the 6th WECA meeting?
Feel free to send your proposals in.
We'll get them into you
Happy to
tomorrow.
get them.
Thank you very much.
Next question is Green question 3, which is Christine Townsend. You have no supplementaries. Thank you. Moving on swiftly to Labour question 3, which is Nicola Hume. Do you have supplementaries, Nicola? Questions on HMO licensing and play park funding?
Yes, Philippa actually.
Philippa, sorry, what should I say? It says Nicola. Sorry.
Okay.
On my script it says.
Okay, thank you. So yes, thank you for your answers. First of all, on the additional licensing of HMOs, just really to ask, do you agree that both tenants and neighbourhoods are benefiting from this new scheme?
Yeah, I do. They're there to protect the housing stock for Bristol residents and obviously to make sure that we are getting the right mix of tenures, and not a sweeping out of existing residents or existing usage types as well. So yeah, we've been positive about the results.
Brilliant, thank you. My second question on parks and green spaces and play equipment particularly. Really pleased to see that 7.5 million is being invested. You won't have exact figures, Mary, but just wondering, do you know how this compares to previous administrations or other councils around the country in terms of spending on play equipment and so on?
I'd have to look, and maybe that's a good prompt for us to work with you on something where we actually share that. What I would say is, and it's one of the things Steve has been grappling with, we as a city, and Ellie, I shouldn't want to forget Ellie, we have a disproportionate amount of green space per capita than any other core city. Ellie, is that right? We carry a lot of park and green space, so that obviously brings financial pressure because that has to be maintained, the play equipment in it has to be maintained as well. So that's a challenge, but we'll come back on those other numbers for you.
We now have Conservative question 3, which is Steve Smith about written off debt penalty charges. Do you have any supplementaries, please?
I do, thank you, my Deputy Lord Mayor. And thank you, Marvin, for the response. Now, on question 1, I'm assuming the information in here has been provided for you by officers. I know you don't spend your days personally tracing parking tickets. But this is 41,000 tickets. That's getting on for 10% of the city's population that has apparently gone away and can't be traced. I've been chased by bailiffs, wrongly as it turned out, for debts that are several years old, and I've moved house 3 times in between and they managed to find me. So something about this just doesn't pass a smell test. And I guess the question on part 1 is simply, is this an explanation that you're happy with?
I mean, yeah, obviously enforcement and chasing all takes time and resource as well. And one of the points I've made, actually I made it with Chris Skidmore just in a session we were in just last week, was that one of the costs of austerity as we've sought to protect frontline services, which many people in this chamber would have supported, is that we lose backroom capacity to protect those frontline services. And some of that backroom capacity is about tracing people and debt recovery, because it's not a frontline service, even though the financial consequences of not taking these debts obviously are very, very real. We've also been impacted by the pandemic and taking a more humane, just approach to indebtedness and people in arrears through that period as well, as a way of trying to support our population, and that's had about a bit of an impact on it. But recovery of charges and debts is important to the authority and with our finance team, and we'll take the prompt and talk to Stephen about how we make sure we review and make sure we're doing all we can in a fair and just way to recover those charges.
Thank you. Steve, do you have a second
I
supplementary?
do, yeah. I think I'd just say if backroom savings are costing us £3 million in lost income, then it's probably not a sensible saving. My supplementary on my second question is simply, can you justify the damage that these new proposed parking charges are going to do to our local shopping centres and to the communities around them in order to bring in a fraction of what we're allowing to go unpaid with these other parking tickets?
Well, this is all part of the financial challenges we face as local authorities. We kind of had a good mood in here, but I will offer you the challenge of talking to your colleagues in the Conservative Party about the damage done to the country through its policies over the last 13 years, as I just shared, which is being very graphically illustrated by schools crumbling around our children. I think if you, we'll take the challenge. We have very strong initiatives in the city to support businesses and residents. I think one of the reasons we've had such strong support from the business community in Bristol, among with other people in the city, is because of the level of delivery, the cranes up, the delivery taking place, the ambition, Channel 4, City Leap, all the ways in which we've driven to push the economy forward, but also to make it an inclusive economy, which is why the unions have been so forthright in their backing of us, as well. And whatever we do in Bristol is about improvement. We do have financial challenges to take on, and as I said, it would be great to see you on the national stage advocating for your city and the financial challenges we face at the hands of your government, and not just directing your firepower inwards inside this chamber. I would also point out, and I'm sure this has crossed your mind, that one of the challenges with enforcement is that you don't get on recovery of debts, you won't get the money straight away. So it takes an upfront payment, an upfront investment to get that return downstream. That doesn't always fit with where we are in our financial challenge cycle right now. So that adds to the difficulty we face as a local authority. But I'm sure you thought about that.
Thank you. Okay, we're on to Lib Dem question number 3, which is Andrew Brown. And again, it's another question on RAC in schools. Do you have supplementaries, Andrew?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I note that you say that the Department for Education are commissioning further specialist surveys at a small number of educational settings in Bristol. I appreciate you probably won't want to set any hairs running, but are you able to give any more detail on the number of sites involved and or the scope of those investigations?
No, I don't have that this time, but whatever information comes in will come in through our Director of Education and Asher and our Chief Exec, and we'll act on it.
No more questions? Thank you. Okay, so now moving on to Green question 4, which is Emma Edwards, who's got two questions about Muller Road. Do you have supplementaries, Emma?
I do, thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. So I'd really like to thank the Mayor for this answer. It's really comprehensive, and it's actually the most comprehensive answer I've had to this question for quite a while. Myself and the Lockleys councillors have been chasing this for months. We chase officers, we know they're busy, we get very, very little information. Our residents get no information. As you can see, they just think people have down tools because they don't know any better. I see in your answer that the project team do routine checks and all these things are going on behind the scenes. Why aren't ward councillors why don't we hear about this? Is there any way that we can be informed of all these different changes? Because we chase, we get a deadline and then it goes, and then we have to chase and get another deadline, etc. So can we please be informed?
So I'll say a couple of things on on this. Yeah, I mean, we want to chase up to make sure work's done. We don't need people inconvenienced and so forth. From when we first came in, actually, one of the first initiatives we launched here was no idle roadworks. Let's get on top of stuff that's going on and make sure we're driving it. In terms of being informed, I guess it's the nature of the relationships you have with the officers. They don't all have to come through me, so I don't know what it means by chasing and what routes you've chosen, or whether you go to see people in person. Or I would just encourage you to establish relationships. I think the challenge for this chamber on that front, actually, is this as well, that many of the questions here today are about how we get council officers doing better things for the public, right? We have to be careful that we don't just end up trying to set up dynamics where we get the council officers working and servicing councillors. So yes, I would expect them to engage with you in a reasonable way. But I would just say it's not about sitting back and waiting for information to flow in. Go out, establish your relationships, and make sure you're on top of what's going on in your patch.
I mean, okay. I mean, we do, but there we go. If we're not doing a good enough job, I think we are, actually. I think we chase quite a lot and we do build those relationships. The residents directly, is there any way that the residents directly can get information about a 6-month project that's happening on their doorstep that they have no idea what's going on?
Yeah, well, again, turning up with a solution is great. Let's talk to the community development team, identify the channels for communication to go out. And if the normal courses of communication are not reaching people, if those channels that you identify are not in those, then we'll add them to the communications mix. But our community development team, I say, are an excellent team. If you're not engaging with them and engaging with the communities, then I'd say that is a relationship you should really get on top of establishing.
We are, but thank you.
Can we have Labour question number 4, which is Zoe Goodman? 2 questions on Eagle House.
Yeah, hello. Thanks for your answers. Yeah, and just to say I really welcome the attendance of council officers at the Eagle House meeting in August to discuss youth ASB, following my requests and others in the community, so that was great. You mentioned that once the current lease runs out, there's the opportunity for the redevelopment of the site for residential use and a new purpose-built youth and community space potentially there. To create a new home for the Eagle House Community Centre. So 3 years is a long way off, but it can also come around very quickly, as we know. Will there be an opportunity for community involvement in design of that space and its uses, similar to what's happened with Fulwood Broadway, where the Fulwood Broadway working group was already set up, was already working with council officers who were already engaged, who were then well aware when the levelling up funding bid opportunity came up, they were ready to put in a bid quickly. So will there be an opportunity to do something like that in advance of those in these 3 years?
Absolutely. And I think working with councillors like yourself, we can get something organised. If you'd like to, bring a few names together, let us know, and we'll really invest in getting that engagement started. I think too, it would be important to get it done now, so there's momentum coming for post May 24 as well. Because obviously beyond May 24, it's up to whatever this chamber is to make sure that spirit of engagement is carried forward or not. But yeah, please let's make that happen.
Brilliant, thank you. And a second supplementary, I may. Yeah, in the meantime, 3 years is also a long way off. And for clarity for members of the community, who should any breaches of the current lease be reported to so that action can be taken as necessary? There's been a little bit of confusion, and it'd be great to be able to direct them all to one place rather than lots of officers being bombarded. Thank you.
That'd be property services who control leases.
Right.
So drop them a note, and much to the consternation of my team, I say drop one to add to the 1,000 odd emails we get every week.
Obviously, I'm aware of who to contact, but yeah, so that members of the public
property services, but yeah, let us know in the Mayor's office as well so we can chase that with them.
Brilliant, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. So we're now on to Conservative question 4, which is Jonathan Hucker, who's got questions on the deficit and the dedicated schools grant. Jonathan, you've got 1 question and 1 supplementary.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Yes, thank you, Marvin. The answer came through recently. If I require any further information, then I'll contact your office.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to Green question 5, which is Tom Hathaway, who has questions about services department and drains again.
Yes, thank you very much for your response. I'm glad to hear that the developers skirting the use class rules is already on the radar. Waste regulations say that such properties are classed as businesses for the purposes of waste management, and a private contractor must be employed. Does that mean, should Bristol Waste be collecting from properties that are service departments? And if not, how do we appropriately report those instances where they are.
Yeah, I'll have to get some more information on that, and what we can do is look through the agreement when we meet, Kai, and then let's get back to you and make sure any anomalies are picked up.
I think Kai wants to say something.
You'd normally expect a business to have their own commercial contract, but we'll obviously, if you send us the details of this particular case, we can look into it to see what arrangements they've got.
That's great, thanks. And just on the drains, it's great news. The ones that have been hammering away at for ages have finally been done today. But obviously the issues with the contractors refusing work has left us quite a big backlog of jobs. And just linked to John's question earlier, is there a date that the maintenance contract for our drains is up for review, or?
I'll have to find out about the specific contract renewal date. And again, that's something I'll come back to you outside of here. Okay?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so we're now on to Labour question 5, which is Chris Jackson. You've got a question on the youth zone. One question, one supplementary.
Thank you for the answers, Mayor. I've just got one supplementary. At the bottom it says about the cost, 50p and £5 membership. I've raised this many times at meetings with the developers and the people who are going to run it. There are people in Philwood that cannot, with large families, and I'm thinking Hartcliffe and Woodywood as well, that won't be able to afford that. And I was told that they would be let in. Could you just find out how this is going to work? Because I've tried to get answers and I've not received any positive answers. They said, oh, they'll be let in, is what I get from the people running it.
Yeah, we'll have a look at that, Chris. I mean, I think the amazing thing with the youth zone is, one, is it's a world-class facility, and the added refreshing aspect of it, I think, in light of Bristol's history, is that the first ones were built in the south of Bristol as well. And we want it to be accessible, we want it to be a pathway to skills development and economic inclusion, and we don't want barriers getting in the way of those who most need it, getting access to all the support and opportunities that's there. So, yeah, I'm sure that where pricing is an issue, there'll be a way of supporting children and young people to be able to participate anyway. Let's pick it up outside of here and we'll find out what those provisions will be.
Thank you. So
Second one, I'm just glad it's starting before I leave as a councillor.
Okay. Conservative question number 5, which is Richard Eddy, who has two questions on planning department backlogs and delays.
Mayor, I thank the Mayor for his replies. I've got two supplementaries. One, I agree that the recent successful appointment of graduate planners should address the situation, albeit probably slowly. Does the Mayor agree with my view that actually all groups have a part to play in reducing the current planning backlog?
Yes, I do. As an organisation that should be committed to the good of Bristol and making sure that our departments are really facing outward to meet the needs of the city and not being subjected to political gaming. I agree. I'm going to say something, and it's hard to say it, Councillor Eddy, and it's even more hard because I don't think it's the first time I said it. But it's just to say to congratulate you on the way you've chaired planning committee, and I did watch the video at the beginning of the summer as well. We had to deal with a very theatrical moment that was less about the welfare of Bristol and more about leaflet material, and you and throughout the time you dealt with that very well. And I would also say, as chair, even though we're from different parties, you have looked at the needs of the city and supported delivery in Bristol, which is what the city actually needs. So we do appreciate that. And the further we can get away from political opportunism, around the need to develop the city, the sooner we'll be able to really make sure that our planning officers' full efforts are directed towards making sure that we get the scale and kind of development Bristol needs. We need to safeguard that capacity.
Can we stick to the supplementary questions? So do you have a second supplementary?
Indeed, Deputy Lord Mayor, could I press the Mayor one step further? Could I ask him his opinion of those who may respond with knee-jerk opposition to development and regeneration and seek to actually misuse the member referral scheme to delay development?
Yeah, I mean, we've got quite a bit of that going on now. Members really well, I would suggest misusing council processes to delay us meeting the needs of the city in the right way, and I think very dimly of it. I think the real challenge for Bristol, and the challenge that's faced Bristol City Council in the past, is how does it become an outward-looking organisation that's focused on the needs of the city as we see them, rather than an organisation that's consumed by political opportunism and bun fights and manufactured conflicts. We're seeing quite a bit of that. We got one live at the moment in relation to Lockleys as well. So it's a shame, and it costs the city. And as I said, we think dimly of it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Okay, Green question 6, which is Tim Y. He's got 2 questions on EV charging and gullies. Do you have supplementaries, Tim?
Yes, thanks. Thanks for your answers, Marvin, and appreciate you linking me up with the EV team. So if you could facilitate that, that would be great. Particularly, I'd like to understand a bit more of the detail about why gullies aren't suitable for Bristol, but I don't expect you to have that level of detail here. My question really was, I asked about EV strategy, and I think we're quite worried about the increase in the demand for EVs. I mean, 17% of new car sales last year were EV. Obviously, they're phasing out petrol and diesel by 2013. So if there is kind of a strategy on EV charging, however sort of embryonic, I think it'd be good to share it at members' forum. So that would be great. So that's a request to see if that can happen. Really.
So I'd say a number of things about this, Tim. As I said, in my response, feedback to us is we're not convinced, but that doesn't mean it's not possible, right? It just means we're up for the conversation with you about it. If I pick up a few things on the strategy, the challenge is dealing with the city as it currently is, right? The kind of physical layout, our tightly terraced streets and all that. That's going to take money, which is why the City Leap deal we've just done is going to be so essential. EV charging is a big part of that, that scheme. And so we are putting ourselves in the front end of being on the end of that investment track that will allow us to, unlock solutions. The second thing I'd say in line with that is, if you haven't had the chance to visit it, look at the website for 3CI, where Bristol, we're one of the on the advisory panel for that, myself and Susan from Glasgow, and that's the group I've mentioned a few times in here, which has worked together across core cities, London Council, Scottish Cities Alliance and key cities to develop a £200 million pipeline of decarbonisation investment opportunities. What that does is it helps us to make the market in a way that will help us unlock mass rollout of the technologies we have. And one of the challenges shared by the Chief Exec of Siemens a little while ago, and I've heard it echoed by other people, is we've got the technology to solve 80% of the problem. What we don't have are the financial vehicles that get the technology rolled out. The third point I'd make is in the second area is the regeneration work that's going on. I mean, we need to build tens of thousands of homes, build them in the right locations in the right way. That could be an easier one because we're dealing more with a blank canvas when we find the sites. But what we're going to be doing with those regen, when we look at Western Harbour, for example, is building infrastructure into those homes as they're built. So we're not dealing with the retrofitting after the fact. But again, the door's open on any of those fronts. Kai is obviously doing a lot of work on this. Don, and Tom is on housing delivery as well. So please let us know if you want to be involved in those conversations.
Do you have another supplementary? Is that it? That's a nice little bit of dialogue there. Thank you. So we're going to move straight on to Green question 7, which is Ed Plowden. Correct in doing that, I believe. So this is 2 questions on parking controls and Temple Quarter Master Plan. Ed, do you have any supplementaries?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Thank you for your answers, Mayor. I was a bit concerned by one of them. As you've said many times in the Chamber, it's important to take people with us when making improvements to the city, so it's hard to understand why you're questioning the only councillor in Lawrence Hill Ward who's working tirelessly to do this. But regarding RPZs, councillors and your own surveys have shown again and again very strong support, up to 90%. I did bring a survey that showed 85 to 90% support, but still no movement. What exactly does overwhelming support look like?
Yeah, I mean, Lawrence Hill's interesting because it's one of those areas I think it would be interesting to explore. Lord Mayor, you said you wanted to, have more dialogue here as whether you do actually or do not support livable neighbourhoods. We can't quite work it out from the current positioning in Barton Hill, which seems to be supporting but not supporting, just like with housing delivery, supporting houses but not supporting houses. So it would be good to get some clarity from you on that because it would make the political discussions easier. But I'd have to look at the criteria for your survey. You can make these things say whatever you want according to who you to go and speak to, but we haven't been convinced that people have come to us with overwhelming support. And you can see the consequences, which your own co-leader of your national party pointed out when she was kind of hedging a bet on subtly distancing herself from the Livable Neighbourhood project, where she criticised the consultation and engagement with people that went around it. It seemed to be distancing herself from implementation. So we need to make sure that we don't leave those kind of gaps in engagement in the lead-up.
Do you have a second supplementary to?
Yeah, the devil's always in the detail on these things, and I think that's what councillors in East Bristol are looking to try and resolve. In Windmill Hill, the developers have stumped up the cash from an RPZ under a formal legal Section 106 agreement. That would actually mean that we could go to proper statutory consultation and flesh out whether or not there's overwhelming support, which is the whole point of statutory consultation. Why are you holding back the proper process of implementing the local planning authority's policies?
Yeah, we're not holding anything back, but we said it wasn't going to be our approach to roll out residence parking zones. We thought their time had passed, so you'd have to come with a really convincing case based on strong community engagement. But if I just repeat some of the words that have come to from your party before, either you support it or you don't. If you support livable neighbourhoods, then just support them, and then work out how you make it happen. At the moment, your members seem to be hedging their bets and saying we kind of support them, but we don't support them. At some point, and it's going to be something you'll obviously learn as a group. You won't be able to get away with just making statements that go unchecked and untested. At some point, you're going to have to make a decision and step into that very uncomfortable world in which some of the decisions you're going to make are not going to make good material for your leaflets or your Twitter feed.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, we're on now to question...
Sorry, Deputy Mayor. Can I have 1 minute to respond to the false accusation of the Mayor, please? Regarding the Lawrence Hill LBS.
What are you alleging? What's the accusation?
Yeah, accusation is the false, what the Mayor just mentioned now, because he had the meeting with the community in July, and he agreed some amendments to make what we agreed the officers before. And the last Friday, when the Don and his team, they came to the meeting, even they didn't take the minutes, they had that meeting. And when the residents, they said, we don't want to continue the meeting, I asked clearly the person who's representing Mayor's office to take further meeting with the minutes we had. Actually, I wasn't there, they had with the Mayor. So we still want to see that meetings. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm not 100% sure what's going on here, but I think I'm going to square this by saying that this is sort of a clarification of a supplementary question about what consultation looks like. Nothing to say? Okay.
Oh, it looks like the Mayor doesn't want to take the responsibility. Thank you.
I'm going to stop you there. Thank you. Okay. Now moving on to Conservative question 7, which again is Jonathan Hucker's second question on the installation of new litter bins.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Yes, thank you for your response, Marvin. I'll share the information that I have with your office so that it can be escalated.
Thanks.
Thank you. Conservative question 8. We don't. Nope. So moving on then to Conservative question 9, which is Jeff Gollop. You have a question on fly tipping statistics? No, yeah, you do.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Thank you, Marvin, for your answers. A supplementary to question 1. Do you have detail of where the people who've committed the offence, which ward they come from? Because that would also be helpful.
I can check on that. That would be interesting. Yeah, I'll find out.
Do you have a second supplementary, Jeff?
And supplementary to the second answer, and again, I don't expect you to have the answers to this at the tip of your hand, Marvin, but talks about the fines issued being used to analyse where resources are allocated. Actually, it's where offences are recorded that it needs to be allocated, not just where we've managed to catch the culprit. So could we just have an assurance that that is the case?
Yeah, I mean, Jeff, what I'll share with you, I think you're aware right from the very beginning when I mentioned earlier clean streets, fly tipping, and introducing the fines on the streets as well. So we want to really maximise the financial penalties people pay for dropping litter or fly tipping in Bristol. When I go in with my children around the city at the bottom of my mum's road, there were 3 spots where people constantly drop litter and expect the council to pay to come and pick it up from it. Absolutely enrages me. I think it's an absolute cheek to live in a city and drop litter on the street and make it worse for everyone else. And that's an understatement of what I think about it, particularly when you think about the cost it has as well and the consequences for other areas. There is a little bit of a dilemma around the fines in that sometimes it costs us to prosecute and when we don't get the revenue. It's one of the points that Kai has raised as well on fly tipping is one of the areas. So it ends up in a financially challenging situation and costing us more money and being a financial challenge, as is enforcement, a financial challenge for us. And then we're not always guaranteed that the benefits of enforcement, the financial benefits will outstrip the cost of it as well. But we're always looking for solutions, which is why we had the clean streets, why we're meeting with Bristol Waste again, why we introduced the fines, and why we recently got some money as well to up our game. And just as an aside, as I just mentioned to Tim on the EV charging, what I've asked the regeneration team to do is when we've got master planning on Western Harbour going on now, when we're thinking about the tens of thousands of homes that need to be built, how do we build waste and litter out of those developments as well, just so that the architecture is one that's clean and we dispose of waste well, if whatever waste we do have. So we are thinking about the old city, but thinking about the city to come as well. But it's a challenge for us.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we're on now to our last question, which is Conservative question 12, which is Kevin Quartley, who's got a question about the Hartcliffe Way Recycling Centre. I haven't missed anybody, haven't I? No.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and also thank the Mayor for his response, but no further questions.
Thank you. Okay, so now we do have a few minutes left, so we're going to move on to statements in the order of receipt. So I remind members that you have a maximum of 1 minute will be allowed for the presentation of each statement. There'll be no debate on the statements and they will be referred to the Mayor for consideration. Okay, so the first statement is from Councillor Gary Hopkins about Redcliffe Park tennis courts. Gary, you've got 1 minute.
Thank you, Deputy
Lights are
Mayor.
on.
There's been an awful process involved with this. A slanted consultation was put out by the same team who attempted to deal with Jubilee Pool. We saw what happened there. Despite the consultation being slanted against them, residents managed to make extremely clear that they did not accept the way they were being pushed by the officers towards a solution that was not necessary. And not only did they reject it, they gave lots of very cogent and intelligent reasons why not. This was due for review, the consultation and a meeting. That was cancelled. The decision was actually made in advance of the survey and consultation results being published and with a refusal of a meeting to consider them. As a result of that, the primary campaigner will, I'm pretty sure, be going off to the Ombudsman, and I urge the Mayor to sit down and have a meeting with us before that actually happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Nicely kept to time. Thank you. Next councillor, please, is Ed Plowden, who's going to talk about the DCA committee. We have 1 minute, Ed.
I've been proud to serve on the DCA committee over the past 2 years and contribute to thoroughly debated and properly made decisions. There have been some with which I fundamentally disagreed, but nevertheless I was careful to uphold the authority and legitimacy of the committee and its processes. I'd therefore like to make it clear that I've resigned from the DCA because the people I live amongst and I'm proud to represent have severe concerns about the committee following what is now known locally as the Broadwater scandal. As I can no longer defend the committee's actions, I cannot continue to be a part of it. I'm pleased to say that my successor on the committee will be Councillor O'Rourke. She will be a superb replacement. I urge everyone involved in the planning system to demonstrate the transparent and high standards of leadership and objectivity that the people of our great city expect, and for us as individuals and collectively as political parties to exercise the required discipline to ensure that trust is maintained and, when necessary, rebuilt.
Thank you for your kind words. Next is Councillor Christine Townsend, who has a statement on the Venturers and Bristol University. Christine, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. So this is leading on from the events from last week. I'm not going to read it out, but what I am going to say is if the most important thing to people is the apparent tone of this statement, then they really need to have a look in the mirror. The actions of the merchant venturers last week, the utter contempt that they showed for those school children, their families and their communities, if you in any way, if your brain or your mind goes to, but they do good work, or look at these other good things that they're doing, you really need to look yourself in the mirror. These people, since they've been in our state school system, what we've seen from them is inadequate education. They provide safeguarding risks, noted by Ofsted. They've had children engaged with ritual worship of slave traders. They've had a staff member win a case of institutional racism. School governing bodies writing character references for their chief executive on child sex abuse assault cases in court, who was then subsequently found guilty and went to prison. How this administration is going to deal with the fact that the merchants are also involved in the South Bristol Youth Zone remains to be seen. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Christine. Now moving on to Councillor Patrick McAllister. Finally, we'll just about enough time to your statement on the chocolate path.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'll be quick. So I'm very happy that the Chocolate Path has now reopened. It is a much-loved amenity to Spike Island and indeed all of Bristol. Unfortunately, when going down the path, my happiness was tempered a bit by seems to be the unsatisfactory nature of some of the works that have been done. On just a cursory walk down the path, I encountered broken paving, cracked brickwork, sections of unpainted fences, which is ironic considering there was a final delay which was widely reported to have been to finish painting. And areas where that new paint had been allowed to stain the concrete very unappealingly. And most worryingly, as I mentioned in my question, there was the gate. So I do call upon the council to undertake a full inspection of the path and investigate where in the organisational chain of command things may have gone wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McAllister, and thank you all for being here today. Thank you for managing the meeting. I think there were a lot of really good questions and good answers. But that's just my opinion. You know, nobody really wants to know my opinion. So I will just bring this meeting to a close and join you back in here at 6 o'clock for the full council meeting. Thank you.